What happens when a black woman, overlooked and underestimated, rises to lead an army on the brink of collapse? You won't believe how Captain Layla Harris turned the battlefield, and a bitter legacy, on its head. What came next left the entire base silent, questioning everything they thought they knew. The first light of dawn was barely breaking through the dense, choking fog that clung to the abandoned trenches and the thick, muddy battlefield. Captain Layla Harris was already on her feet, standing tall with a cold fire blazing in her eyes, not from the chill in the air, but from an unyielding, iron-willed determination that had taken root deep inside her soul. Layla was a woman whose skin was the rich color of dark chocolate, and whose spirit was as steadfast and grounded as the very earth beneath her heavy boots. She had never before found herself in such an unfamiliar role, standing shoulder to shoulder with White General Garrett Stewart, a man whose reputation thundered like a storm ripping across clear skies, and whose character was as relentless and stubborn as the tide itself. She wasn't just an officer. No, she was a voice in the chaos, a voice many tried to silence. But this morning, as the army hummed and bristled with the tension of preparing for another deadly assault, Layla's moment of quiet humanity shone through, a rare, delicate act of kindness that instantly revealed the true depth of her strength. While others barked orders or nervously paced, she caught the trembling hand of a young private who looked like he might collapse under the weight of his own nerves. Her voice was calm but firm, a steady anchor in the storm. "Take a deep breath. We're going to get through this. Together." That brief touch of warmth, that flicker of care amid a cold, indifferent war zone, showed who she really was. Beneath the armor and the rank, beneath the barked commands, there was something far more vital: empathy, sacrifice, and understanding. But fate, as it tends to do, has a cruel sense of humor. Layla barely had time to savor that small victory of the heart before brutal reality came crashing down, embodied in the furious storm that was General Garrett himself. His voice tore through the morning haze like a thunderclap. "A black woman cannot command." Those words slashed the air, tightening hearts and igniting a burning fury of wounded pride and bitter humiliation. Each syllable landed like a slap across the face, a reminder that even on this battlefield, where lives hung in the balance, the deepest wounds were often invisible, but just as deadly. It felt as if the very ground beneath them trembled, recoiling from the injustice so raw and so familiar. Layla stood silent, a silent witness to her own doubts, long buried beneath years of hard-earned resilience. Her gaze didn't waver, but inside a tempest roared, poisonous prejudice slicing through her like 1,000 tiny arrows. Around her, soldiers cast glances, some filled with skepticism, others with quiet solidarity. It was like watching a play where the leading lady had been handed a script she never asked for, forced to perform a role scripted by others' narrow minds. But even in that moment, Layla refused to break. She knew the fight ahead wasn't just bullets and explosions, but the much deadlier war waged against her in the hearts and minds of those she served alongside. Her mind sharpened, becoming a war machine, calculating every move in this deadly chess game where her opponent wasn't just General Stewart's wounded ego, but the entire system that backed his words. Amid the chaos of that urgent morning, the order came to advance. Layla took responsibility for coordinating the attack in one of the most dangerous zones, an area where dozens of soldiers had already been swallowed by an endless loop of pain and fear. And that's when the nightmare truly began. Her commands were ignored, her strategies sabotaged. "Hey, Layla, maybe you should stop trying to be the smart one," sneered an officer known for his outdated views, his voice dripping with condescension. Somewhere behind her, the general stirred again, pointing a disdainful finger and growling, "Get back to your place." Every word burned. Layla's heart clenched with the sharp sting of loneliness. Around her weren't just enemies. They were supposed allies, the ones who should have been her backbone, now turned into chains binding her tight. But damn it, she wasn't the type to back down without a fight. That piercing voice inside her kept shouting, louder than the gunfire, "If you don't fight for yourself, nobody else will." Through the thunder of gunfire and the crack of rifles, Layla found herself at the front lines, leading a small unit breaking through enemy defenses. There, under relentless fire and with dread tightening its grip, she was saving more than just wounded bodies. She was saving fading hope. Her hands, strong but tender, treated those slipping into unconsciousness, those grappling with pain and terror. And then, just when it seemed the whole army was finally feeling that she was the true leader among them, General Garrett found himself in mortal danger, cut off from his men, vulnerable like a deer caught in the hunter's sights. Who else but Layla could brave the fire, the mud, and death itself to pull him from the jaws of annihilation? Ignoring protests around her in her own gnawing fear, she rushed to his side. As she moved through the hail of bullets and deafening explosions, each step beat with the pulse of determination. Her mind flashed one fierce thought: if I die today, let it be not because of the color of my skin, but because I stood for what was right. When Layla finally reached the general, unconscious and broken, her skill and strength stabilized him. She carried him across the battlefield, feeling every movement, every heartbeat, as if his life were her own. Then came the moment of truth. The general's eyes fluttered open, and instead of gratitude, his lips parted to utter words that stopped Layla cold. You saved my life, but remember, you do not command. It hit her like a dagger to the heart, a harsh reminder that even when saving lives, she was still trapped in the cage of racism. She answered with silence because words felt hollow in that moment. Instead, her eyes spoke volumes, the eyes of a woman who had been fighting not just an external enemy, but the insidious poison eating her from within. Around them, the air hung heavy with silence, thick as smoke that refused to clear until the truth was finally heard. Layla knew her journey was just beginning, and this fight would not be on battlefields with guns blazing. It would be inside the very system, a monstrous machine that swallowed the strongest and bravest whole. But today, at this dawn, she was already a hero. Unrecognized, uncelebrated, but no less real. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how it all unfolded. The dust from battle was finally settling, the adrenaline in her veins beginning to ebb just enough for the weight of reality to settle squarely on Captain Layla Harris's shoulders. And inside her, a new storm was brewing. A swirling tempest of bureaucracy, bias, and quiet hostility that no bullet had ever managed to deliver. She was no longer just the woman who had saved General Garrett Stewart's life out there on the field. She had become a target, and not one adorned with medals or praise, but one marked by suspicion, dismissal, and cold indifference. The war room felt less like a command center and more like a theater of the absurd, where the main characters weren't only officers in uniform, but deeply ingrained prejudices locked away in outdated files and antiquated attitudes. General Garrett, despite his efforts to contain his fury, couldn't hide the turmoil beneath his stern facade. His voice, when it came, was a blow, thinly veiled disdain disguised as reluctant acknowledgement. I respect your courage, Captain, but the Army is about order, not your experiments. Experiments, Layla thought, eyes narrowing with sharp clarity. This guy probably still thinks a woman behind the wheel is some kind of extreme sport, especially if that woman happens to be black. Her words, her ideas, her commands, they were all systematically ignored. Every meeting, the shadows of officers who thought her presence was a mistake hovered over the table like bad omens. You just don't know your place, Layla, one sneered, holding a coffee cup with such disgust it might as well have been a poisoned chalice. Sergeant James, the only one in that room who openly showed his support, stood by her side like a living shield. His voice was low but firm. Captain, don't listen to them. You're the light they're afraid to see because it blinds them. Even that small circle of allies could not lighten the oppressive cloud hanging over Layla. Her tactical proposal to improve battle strategies, born of long hours spent analyzing data and experience, was dismissed without a single substantive reason. The committee, which included her very own peers, combed through her plans in search of any flaw to justify rejection. Then came the breaking point. At a particularly tense meeting, when she dared to present her ideas again, the general nearly lost it. Layla, enough! You're trying to overturn a system that's been running for centuries. We will not let you do that. You are the exception, not the rule. That was no mere order, it was a challenge. The irony being that the very woman he called an exception bore on her shoulders risks and responsibilities he feared even to approach. Sometimes Layla caught herself thinking she was fighting not just an external enemy, but ghosts inside her own ranks. What does it feel like to stand on the side of justice when your own brothers in arms try to make you invisible? She wondered, lifting her chin high despite the crushing pressure. One bleak evening, when the sky hung heavy like a leaden weight, an alarm shattered the stale air of the command post. Intelligence reported a fresh enemy advance. This was her moment, a chance to prove once and for all that Layla was no accident, but a force to be reckoned with. She sprang into action, quickly organizing patrols, coordinating positions, and issuing commands with the precision of a seasoned leader. The general's face flickered with doubt, but he remained a silent observer. When the battle erupted, Layla's mastery was undeniable. Her tactical maneuvers saved hundreds of lives and held critical ground. Yet when she was captured by the enemy, it was the general, contradictions and all, who sounded the alarm and launched a rescue mission. Back at base, exhausted but internally unbreakable, Layla's face reflected a bitter cocktail of betrayal and pride. The general approached, unsure how to put his thoughts into words. Instead, he offered a restrained nod, a gesture louder than any speech. But even in that moment of recognition, a thin layer of distrust lingered. Like a wall he wasn't ready to tear down completely. Layla knew many battles still lay ahead, yet now she was not alone. Soldiers who had witnessed her strength and heard her voice began to openly voice their support. She caught whispers behind her back. Maybe she really is something. And that was the beginning of change. Through it all, Layla held on to her humor, sharp and dark as ever, to keep from losing her mind. So this is what it's like to be in the army and still be last in line for respect, she mused, lighting a cigarette in the shadowed corner of her tent. They want me to be the pretty lady in the parade, nothing more. Funny how they don't realize I fight for those who can't. She often quipped to herself, if I got paid for every slight, I'd own my own battalion by now and command it the right way. Layla had become a symbol of the fight against a system where racism and bias hid behind the faces of colleagues and orders. Inside her burned a spark, the spark of change that no storm could extinguish. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay tuned to see how this hero put everyone in their place. At the break of dawn, the last battle loomed like a storm ready to burst, and the air itself seemed charged with an electric tension so thick it felt as if the very earth was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion that would shatter the fragile calm. Captain Layla Harris was no longer the officer who could be ignored or underestimated, a mere shadow in the ranks. She had become a force of nature, a voice that would not be silenced, a power so undeniable that even General Garrett Stewart, the very man who once doubted her, had no choice but to acknowledge her authority, however grudgingly. The field command post was alive with the sounds of war, explosions echoing like thunderclaps, radios crackling urgent commands, and soldiers moving with purpose in the chaos that only battle could bring. In the eye of this storm stood Layla, as steady and unyielding as a rock battered by relentless waves, cold, calculating, and resolute. She caught herself thinking, sharp and clear, time's up on the lies. This general who shouted I couldn't command is now the one following my lead. The irony was as biting as the morning chill. Her team moved with a precision born of trust and discipline, every man and woman responding to her every gesture, every word. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that too many lacked in these dark hours. She knew what was at stake. Lives, yes, but also something more profound. The long-awaited recognition that could rewrite her fate and perhaps begin to unravel the suffocating web of the system itself. Then the moment came. The chaos sharpened into terror as General Stewart, leading his squad, found himself encircled, the enemy closing in like a noose tightening around his throat. The fear flashed in his eyes, wide and raw, betraying the practiced calm he usually wore like armor. Without hesitation, Layla surged forward, cutting through the crossfire, dodging death with a fierce determination that went beyond duty. a fire inside her that no amount of bullets or bombs could extinguish. She whispered to herself with fierce pride, "That's right, this is who's in command." Reaching the general, she steadied him, grasping his hand as he faltered under the weight of pain and exhaustion. Side by side, they made their perilous journey through torn earth and blazing gunfire, each step a defiant act of survival. Every second throbbed with adrenaline and the raw, unyielding fight for life. When the general finally regained consciousness, his gaze met hers, not with words or grand gestures, but with a look heavy with a newfound respect. Something shifted within him, a veil of bias lifting ever so slightly. That silent admission was more powerful than any speech. Back at base, when the dust of war finally settled, General Stewart made a public declaration that shook the doubters to their core. Today, Captain Harris proved that true strength isn't about rank or skin color, but courage and resolve. She is a model for us all. His words hit like thunder, reverberating through the minds of those who only yesterday had questioned her worth. But Layla knew better. This was just the beginning. Her battle against the system was far from over. She had become a symbol of change, a blazing spark with the power to ignite a new era in the Army's ranks. Those who had once looked down on her now found themselves confronting a truth they could no longer deny, that old prejudices were fragile and destined to crumble under the weight of time and truth. Maybe now, she thought, watching the sun climb higher, painting the sky with hope, they'll finally understand that command belongs to those who earn it, not just those who wear a white uniform. Lighting another cigarette with a wry smile, she mused aloud, "If I'd gotten $1 for every mistake they made trying to derail me, I'd have built my own army by now, one where skin color doesn't write the orders." Layla Harris's story became more than a war tale. It became a legend of spirit triumphing over prejudice. Her journey inspired countless soldiers, especially those who had long felt invisible among their own. Her name echoed with respect, her actions a blueprint for true leadership. The past, with all its scars and struggles, would not be forgotten. But the future? The future was being written anew, in the bold script of equality, dignity, and justice.